Hello friends, this is Cara-Renee with B.Reborn Art and Healing, coming to you with the video for my first page in this 2023 art journal. You would have already seen the video where we collaged the inside and outside cover. And we will be decorating the cover later. I did have a comment from somebody saying something about doing something else on the cover. I basically just needed to get paper on here to protect the surface because this is a chipboard cover and I wanted to make sure I didn't get a lot of wet medium on it. So we will be coming back to this. This was just a starting place, so look at that beauty. I did get some cracking along here, but this is all going to be mixed media beautified, so it's not going to be a problem at all. So off camera, you would have seen in the other video, in the other pictures, that I used a very dark brown wax thread to sew my signatures in, and I sewed them in so that the strings were coming through on the inside. I did not like that, so I did go ahead and rip all those strings out and I replaced them with white and I made them go into the spine. So if you watched the other video, it's a hidden spine, so all the strings are behind here and then this piece is glued on. So last night before I went to bed, I went ahead and glued that in, and I just want to show you just how stable that is. You can see there's absolutely no separation here. It's going to be epic for an art journal. So I am super pleased with this. And I just love some of the grunginess that's happening here already because I came in with my makeup brush and I just put a bunch of vintage photo archival ink on that, and it caught on all of the wrinkles and such. So what's going to be very different in this journey for me, I apologize for the lighting. It seems a little bit dark. I have my light on, but it's really gloomy outside and it's early in the morning, so my apologies if that's bothersome. So what I'm doing different in this series is I'm going to be very strategic. I tend to be very kind of haphazard with my art journaling because that's the way that I learned. But I've been watching some videos, one in particular, her name is Ivy Simpson, I believe. She doesn't have a lot of new content, but, and I'm also learning this, I also have learned this through Sean Petit, the mixed media artist, where she has this insider class, which I haven't done and I need to get back to it. That's one of my goals for 2023. I pay every month for it and I haven't been doing it. So the idea is that you come up with your bits that you want to use, and then you create your color palette around that. So these are some of the images that I have pulled just so that you can get an idea of why I chose the colors that I did. And I'm going to introduce all of this and then we'll go into voiceover mode because it gets pretty crazy. So these are some of the images that I'll be using. This is from a magazine, and I just love this. It's a junk journal. You can see the button and the closure, and it's just absolutely stunning. So I'm pulling in a lot of these colors, this kind of robin eggs blue, this kind of a burgundy color, again, that kind of robin's egg blue, and some cream colors. And then, so these are some of the elements that I'm going to be using in the collage. So that is that. And I will again be doing a voiceover because this is a new process, a new way for me to think through and move through this. So I want to make sure that it's not a broken process for you guys and that it makes sense and it's pleasing to watch. I did grab some stencils. I probably will be grabbing some more. I'm not sure. I just got these from I believe Joann's. They were on sale, so I went ahead and grabbed a couple more. I love these arches, so we're going to be incorporating that. I may even be using these flowers, but we will see. And then I've also picked out some collage papers that also match the tones in my elements. So we've got some of that blue. This is scraps from Ruby and Pearl wallpaper. We've got a little bit of green. We've got some music page and such. So we'll be using those. I've got all of my paints laid out. This is the palette. So I've got Deco Deep Burgundy, Deco Avocado, Anita's Minty Teal, Anita's Slate Blue, DecoArt Blush Pink and DecoArt Thicket. I'm not sure if I'm going to use, I may be using this one instead of this one. I'm not sure. We may use both. We'll see how it goes. I am going to go out and get a couple of brushes because this technique that I watched, the artist used like a scubbling brush, and it's a really like hard-ended. I thought I had some, but I don't. I looked through all of my brushes. I'm pretty sure I had some, but I'm going to zip out and get some of those because it allows you to do kind of a dry brush technique, which I tend to get really wet in my mixed media, and I don't think you need to do that all the time. I think there's a benefit in slowing down and really kind of being more methodical and deliberate with brush strokes and things like that. So those are my acrylic paints. And these I pulled out some soft pastels because I thought they would be fun to introduce as well. So unfortunately the little things are so little and they don't actually say the name on them, which is kind of frustrating. I'd like to get some that have the name on them, but so basically those are the colors. So I've got those set out over there. I'm not a big fan of the pastels because they're very messy, which I don't know why that bothers me. I guess because they're chalky. But anyway, let's get on with it. So we're going to start with getting this stuff out of the way so I don't get it all wet, because that would be a shame. So I'm going to move some of this paper out of the way so I don't get things messed up. We will be using some clear gesso, another thing I need to pick up more at the store. There's not much in this, because what we're going to do is I'm going to put the papers down with my Liquitex Fluid Matte Medium, and then I'm going to push it back with some gesso and then coat it with a coat of clear gesso, because that's going to create that tooth that we need in order to have the surface receive all of the paints that we're going to be putting on. So I'm going to take a drink of my coffee. It's early in the morning. I'm on Christmas break. It's been a rough break. I'm telling you what, it's been rough. But my granddaughter got me this cup. Oh, I can't tip it without spilling my coffee, but it's a Winnie the Pooh cup, and he's my boyfriend, so it made me very happy. So I've got some large clips here because we want to make sure that we can hold everything in place as I'm putting the papers down as well. So, and I've also pulled a couple of pieces of parchment, and so we're going to go ahead and open this. I'm going to try to go in order through this journal. We'll see how that goes. I will date them in case I, neglect to keep them in order through the journal. So I'm going to go ahead and clip this on this edge like so. You know what? I'm feeling like I want, I'm almost feeling like I want a large piece of paper to go down as a background, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to do something different. And then we've got another piece of parchment paper, and then as soon as I get glue and all, we'll go ahead and turn the music on so you guys can enjoy that instead of watching me or hearing me talk about gluing, because it's really not that exciting. So I'm just going to use this clip down here. Hopefully it'll reach. Almost. Let's not go quite as far in. Let's go to here. And this just helps everything to kind of stay in place while you're working. I'll have to move that when I get to that edge, but that's okay. So we're going to start by protecting the spine. So even though every signature has 3 pages, you can see that I've got a page underneath here, so nothing's going to seep through, but that's not always going to be the case. So I'm going to just start with the practice of using some masking tape down the spine. Now that I have the tape affixed, I'm going to go ahead and just collage on large pieces of vintage music and book pages just to cover up all of this white. I really struggle with a strictly white base. It kind of leaves me a little bit lost. So getting some collage paper down is a great start. Of course, you can do whatever you're comfortable with. And in case I didn't mention it, the masking tape is just there to protect the spine, because we do get, obviously, fluids will run to that area of the spread, so you want to make sure that you're protecting that. This is some old vintage paper. There's a stack of old vintage stuff, and I ran across some images I thought would be really pretty to use in a future art journal project. So I'm just going to go ahead and tear these down real quick, and then we'll get them adhered. am using kind of a catalyst tool. It's a silicone rubber, soft, kind of an egg-shaped piece of material that allows me to really get a lot of matte medium. I'm using fluid matte medium from Liquitex. And I really like it because it preserves my brushes. You do get a little bit messy because as you get dipping into that matte medium, you get a lot of that medium on the on this tool, and I had to continue to wipe it off just to get my hands, to keep my hands from getting completely disgusting. And then I am also watching that spine to make sure that I've got a good bend and fold there where it's going to close and open. And so yeah, those are just some things to keep in mind. In watching Ivy, she actually uses a tape called gaffer's tape, and it is a fabric tape, a really durable fabric tape. Thinking about picking some up, I'm not sure. It looked pretty darn thick. And I'm going to kind of play around and see how well this masking tape works for protecting that spine, and then I'll make a decision later. So there's just where I'm talking about that product. I've had them for ages, but they tend to get put in a little basket and then I forget about them. So I'll go ahead and just let you continue to watch. And again, just folding that paper so that it is going to fold with the book as it closes. So just by folding it, you can kind of create that natural bend that is needed. So just going to finish up the last little bits of collage here, and then we will be drying this. And I will be coming in after that and using a makeup brush and putting Vintage Photo all across the page. That is going to catch, that ink is going to catch on the edges of the paper where they connect. I am using Vintage Photo Archival ink. If you were to be using a Distress Oxide or Distress ink in a like color, you would it would bleed with other mediums. So that's just something to keep in mind if you are using ink. I really, really love archival ink in all colors, so it works really, really great. Not real concerned about wrinkles. As I've mentioned before, I love that we get them because when we put the ink on, it does, the ink will catch on those wrinkles, which is really cool. I like it. So If you don't, you can be a little bit more strategic and use a credit card or something to smooth out, or a catalyst tool of some kind, and smooth out those wrinkles as you go along. Kind of depends on the composition that we're going for as to whether or not I don't mind the wrinkles or whatever. So totally up to you. I'm going to go ahead and give this a quick dry. And there we go, coming in with the archival ink and vintage photo, and my makeup brush. And I know that the talking hands can be a little bit distracting, I guess, but I said initially when I sat down to do this video that it was going to be a voiceover after the intro, but I continued to talk because that helps my process. So I would rather be able to talk, cut out those words, and have talking hands and maintain a linear process that makes sense for you all to watch. So I don't mind that. So let's go ahead and get on with the next step. I'm going to come in with some white gesso and push back some of those papers. It's really beautiful, and I love the vintage look there, but it is a little bit too vibrant for a background, in my opinion. So I'm just going to use my palette knife. I start with the palette knife and kind of get the scrapey bit, and then change over to my fingers and just really work that in. I will also come in with a baby wipe. And because we used Liquitex fluid matte medium, the surface is very slick at this point. And so by applying some gesso, we are creating some tooth on the paper again, so that when we come in with other mediums such as the paint, we will have something for that paint to adhere to rather than just kind of be able to be wiped off. And so that's one of the benefits. There's a benefit to the Liquitex matte medium because you are sealing the paper as well, as I mentioned before, adhering the papers, and then by putting a layer on top, you are also sealing it. But then you do have to come in with something to create that grit again, so that you have something for your mediums to stick to. So here's just coming in with the baby wipe and just pushing that back a little bit more, softening it in areas that it's heavier, and then we'll be drying that again. Nice and dry. Nothing really great to see there, just some standard music notes and text there, just from some vintage books that I have. And talking there about having, between the first segments and then this segment, I did go to the store and I went and got my nails done, and I was kind of glamorously showing those off a little bit. I've been having a French tip for a while and went back to some color, which I really enjoy as well. So had to brag a bit about that. So coming in again with a coat of that archival ink and vintage photo. And all of the supplies will be linked over on my blog, and a link to the blog will be found in the description box. And the reason why I link to the blog is because I put a lot of close-up photos. That's where my Sunday's Art of Truth is written and those kinds of things. So it's easier for me to do that and have everything in one place. So we're going to go ahead and start by getting our colors out of our acrylic paints. And so we are using, again, to review, we're using Anita's Slate Blue, Deco Art Deep Burgundy, Deco Art Avocado. I don't think we ended up using the Avocado. Anita's Minty Teal, and Deco Art Blush Pink, and Deco Art Thicket. The Thicket was the game changer in this project. It was definitely the color to be using. I'm super happy with how it turned out. So I'm just using this little watercolor palette to kind of have a place to put my paint. And so this is the Minty Teal from Anita's. It's just a craft acrylic. Just using my finger and spreading out that really pale color all around the spread, focusing a lot on the seams of the paper, because that's what helps to make the layout more cohesive and not so cut up and choppy. So you can do as little or as much of that as you wish. And I think I do come in from time to time with a baby wipe, and then I go back and forth between these Scubble brushes, which I really love. I very much enjoyed playing and experimenting with more of a dry brush experience. I do tend to go really heavy-handed when I apply paint to any project, and so this was a really great practice for me to see what I like, and I really found that it was satisfying in a lot of ways. It reduced the amount of paint that I left on the surface, and I loved the scruffy feel of brushing that on really dry, and so really liked that. And then I'm coming in with the pink, which is the blush pink from Deco Art, and doing the same effect here. I do go back and forth again between my fingers and the brush, as you'll see as we move through this. And then we're just going to move through each of the colors. I'm going from lightest colors to darkest colors. And the pink, or the deep burgundy from Deco Art is one of the last colors that we introduce. It is one of the colors that I chose that was the most challenging because it was so bold, and I really had to do a lot of dancing around that color and figuring out where to put it that was going to be the best. And I didn't want it to overtake, I wanted it to complement. And so I'll let you go ahead and just watch as we go back and forth. You'll see that I'm also dipping into some white, titanium white acrylic paint, heavy body paint there in the center well. But I'm going to go ahead and just turn the music on and let you watch. Just again coming in and introducing some of the other colors in the palette. And I believe I talked about that at length in the intro. I don't tend to start with a color palette, which I think is why a lot of my mixed media can kind of go sideways in a hurry, because I kind of then I'm willy-nilly grabbing for paint rather than kind of starting with a plan. And basically what I did is I used the images, the magazine images that I chose, to determine what my palette was going to be. And that worked really well. It was not perfect in this process, because as we get to the end, you're going to see that after I get the images on and I kind of try to frame them a little bit, I felt like I was losing some definition. It was getting really kind of almost claustrophobic feeling to me. But in the end, it was epic, as you'll be able to see in the photos at the end of the video. It was perfect. I wouldn't have changed a thing. Practice makes perfect. I use that word loosely because perfection is not what I'm after here, but that kind of that practice of play and experimenting with what works and what doesn't work and how to kind of refine that process to give the desired result is really satisfying. And that's what I mean here when I talk about how I kind of pushed through and just continued with the logic of what I was trying to do and just trusted the process. And I'm really glad that I did, and I didn't kind of jump ahead and try to rectify things that felt like they weren't going the way that I wanted them to. So this is that Thicket color. Again, this was the star of the show as far as color tones. It didn't exactly match the tones in the papers that we're using, but it was just fine. And you're going to see here in a little bit, I realized that I completely forgot to bring in the collage papers that I had torn that were going to go with the color palette, but I don't think we needed them. I think this worked out just fine. Next time around, I will experiment and play with actually using those collage papers just kind of as another layer. So here, just coming in with that deep burgundy, and at first I was mixing it with white, but then it felt like it was too pink, and I really needed it to be deeper. So I'm going to be fussing a lot with this color, but I'm going to go ahead and just turn the music on and let you watch. I pulled out one of my favorite stamps. It's a Paris stamp that has some symbols and some French text, etc. And I'm using my Vintage Photo Archival ink to go ahead and stamp here and there. At first, I wasn't really feeling very good about the color of that ink, but in the end, it was a great compliment. Normally, I would be stamping with black ink, but this worked out really well. I am going all over both sides of the page, and I'm going both vertically and horizontally depending on which direction the text is going. So I think that created a lot of interest that was really pleasing as well in the end. So different than a lot of my work, a lot of this background shows, which I think is really beautiful. So now I'm going to come in with my heavy body titanium white Liquitex paint and do some stenciling. I chose, I was kind of toying around with which kind of mandala stencil I wanted to use. So I do pull another one off here and decided to go with my first choice again anyway. So, and I just put out my paint on a piece of parchment paper. That wasn't really the greatest choice because every time I went over to pounce and get some more white paint, it would just lift that parchment paper. So a little bit later I will switch over to just putting it directly on my glass mat here. But I love this this technique. I mean, I do a lot of stenciling with paint as well as with gesso and things like that, but I love this white because it kept the entire background there really light, at least initially. And so I'm very, very glad. Again, I saw that over on Ivy's channel, and I love the subtlety of it. So I'm going to go ahead and just turn the music on and let you watch. I'm going to be putting this stencil in 3 different places on the spread. Now I'm just using my baby wipe to kind of soften some of the edges that were that had some excess paint that's, you know, that showed up where I didn't really want it. So just using my baby wipe to clean up a bit. I'm going to go ahead and dry that really fast. And here's just a close-up of the spread at this point. Went kind of fast, my apologies. So, but I love what's happening here. So we're ready for the collage bits that we're going to be putting on. And again, these were from a magazine that I purchased called, I believe it was called Inside Her Studio. And another great magazine, if you're interested in these kinds of images and inspiration, is Bella Grace, I believe it's called. It's from Stampington. I do get those online through a digital download. So here I'm just going to mark off my my collage bits, what space they're going to take up, because I do want to do some texturizing on the base, and I don't want to be adhering these pieces on a bunch of texture if I can avoid that. So just penciling around each of those shapes, and then we'll be able to start doing a little bit of texturizing. And I have been wanting in my Mixed Media 101 to experiment a little bit with mixing texture paste with different mediums to see if it breaks down the composition of the texture paste. And so I did that here by using my Liquitex flexible modeling paste and some of that acrylic paint, the one that is from DecoArt called Thicket, and it worked out really, really well. The only thing I didn't like was that I put it in the lid of my thing here, and that was just not smart. So I guess here is where I was still debating. My apologies for getting out of order about whether or not I wanted to do some texturizing. So I pulled out this is the gel, the matte gel that I planned on using to adhere my papers. But I believe that I'm going to back this up here in a moment. My apologies, you guys. Or maybe that is the texture paste. I guess it is the modeling paste. I finished filming this yesterday, so it's been 24 hours of old brain. So I sometimes lose track of what I'm doing. So just mixing that up again in the lid. Not my brightest moment, but it worked. So I'm going to take a couple of those stencils that I showed you that I had just purchased from the Tim Holtz collection, and I'm going to do some stenciling with that. On the left side, I apologize, that is a little bit off camera. I was trying to keep everything in screen here. And I'm using the top part of the stencil that has these beautiful flowers and vines and leaves, and put it there on, I guess I did go all the way down with the stencil into that kind of I can't remember what those shapes are called in a stencil, but they are one of my favorites, kind of I'll have to look it up. I'm not sure what they're called, but they're really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and pull that. I grabbed another palette knife that has a little bit of a longer handle because I was having trouble being able to smooth out and get the excess paste off of the surface. So as you can see, I have a really defined line there, and I'm going to use some of that texture paste, that colorized paste, and just smudge that out and soften those edges out so that they're not so abrupt there. And then just using that texture paste and kind of just putting it here and there in that area as well. I'm going to wipe off my stencil because I don't want to transfer any of that texture paste to any other part of the spread that I don't actually want it to show up. I'm going to go ahead and let you watch the rest of this as I just play around with where else I want to put some texture. This turned out really, really great. I'm really in love with it. Just finishing up with that texturizing. I did put a little bit of stenciling there, and I did not like it because I'm right there on the fold of the pages, and it just really wasn't working very well at all. So, and then I'm just going to finish up with a little bit of the floral down there in the bottom right hand corner. And I'll do the same. I'll use my palette knife to kind of soften some edges and just create a little bit more of that texture just here and there, kind of in a scrapey fashion, which I love to do. And this was really nice. And if you look at it, you can tell that it's very balanced in the placement because your eyes can kind of move around the whole spread, and it makes sense and is very pleasing to look at. Just giving that a quick dry, and then I'm going to hold this up so you guys can see the close-up here, I believe. Yeah, there we go. So that texturizing worked out really well. I think the white really complemented that thicket color and was really, really impressive. So I'm really happy with that. So I'm going to be using my Liquitex matte gel. This is a very creamy, soft gel that works great for adhering papers, primarily papers. I mean, it will hold other things, but it's a little bit of a softer gel, so it's not as durable as some of the heavier gels. So here is where I realized that I had forgotten to put on any of the collage papers. So that is okay. This worked out beautifully, and we live and learn, right? So again, I'm using the matte gel to adhere my papers because I am putting these papers down on a porous surface, and so I want to make sure that we get really good adhesion. So I'm putting it back down where I had marked out those lines earlier for the texture. It was at this point where I was feeling like things were feeling pretty contrasty and too dark, but again, sticking with the kind of the intuitive process, I was able to move this through to an end that I was really happy with. Often in mixed media, I don't really know if I'm going to be happy with it. I just have to trust the process, and greater than trusting the process is enjoying the process, enjoying the play, enjoying the experimentation. And so that's what I was really trying to practice here, being very deliberate in those choices. I'm just using a soft towel to press down those images so that I get, again, a really good adhesion. And I was just thinking there about the fact that I've got a little bit of a dried flower in that image, and I'm noticing that I have really no kind of a crimson burgundy color represented in the background to pull that color out of that image. And so I will be, again, playing around with that as we move along. And as I mentioned before, it does feel like it gets a little rough in process for a while there, but it worked out just fine in the end, and I was really happy with the result. I'm just wiping some things off there and cleaning up a bit. And now I'm going to come in with some clear gesso, and the reason for this is, as I mentioned before, we now have a very slick surface because we've got matte medium. And so I want to make sure that I have some tooth on my images here to be able to apply paints and kind of blend those edges into the background of the spread. And so I'm using, again, some clear gesso to do that, and then we'll dry that really quick so that we can move on and start applying some paint around the edges. What I didn't really like here, which I might do a little different in the future, is how geometrical these shapes were. I would have maybe did some rough tearing around the edges. It worked out, again, in the end okay, but it was just not really, it wasn't feeling right at the time. It turned out fine in the end. So while I was drying that, I was playing around with the idea of adding some lace to some various bits on here, because there is some lace in the image there on the right. So I thought that was really pretty. It turned out gorgeous too, so I'm super happy that I did that. And I'm going to come in with some clear gesso, and the reason for this is, as I mentioned before, we now have a very slick surface because we've got matte medium. And so I want to make sure that I have some tooth on my images here to be able to apply paints and kind of blend those edges into the background of the spread. And so I'm using, again, some clear gesso to do that, and then we'll dry that really quick so that we can move on and start applying some paint around the edges. So we're going to come in now, as I mentioned, and try to blend in some of those pages. I went ahead and grabbed some golden acrylic paint in, I believe it was crimson. I did not end up using that, so I'm going to go ahead and just start adding a little bit more paint to the edges of each of those kind of geometrical collage elements. I did not like that, probably because they've got a very dark base, and so they really stood out on the surface, but it worked out just fine in the end. Again, I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to go back and forth between my fingers and my brush and just kind of blend that in a little bit. And again, I got a little worried because it wasn't really doing what I wanted, but I just was persistent and patient and waited for me to move through that entire process before making judgment on it, and it turned out really beautiful. So I'm going to go ahead and turn the music on and let you watch. And now that I'm looking at it, even as as I'm doing the voiceover, I'm noticing that it's not as bad as I was feeling like it was at the time. It really did blend in well. It just was, I think I was unhappy with the geometric shapes and how it wasn't soft like I wanted it to be. And but the images again are very dark in tone at their base, so that was a little bit of a challenge. So. I think one of the keys here was bringing in a little bit more of that slate blue, which was that lighter blue, that I think really helped kind of meld things together a little bit different, rather than a focus on the thicket color that we were using primarily. So by going back and forth between all of those colors, the lighter colors, basically the minty teal, the slate blue, the blush pink, and then the thicket along those lines really worked out well. Just finishing up here, I will be adding my sentiment to this off camera, as well as adding the lace that I mentioned. And the sentiment on this is soulful creativity, and I did end up printing that on some vellum and used some little stickle jewelry kinds of things to make the sentiment look great. So thank you guys so much for stopping by. Head on over to the blog if you want to read the inspiration. Take care, blessings, and I'll see you next time. Bye-bye.